Well, here we are, and we're going to dig down deep, and you're going to get slapped around a bit today, maybe. Some of the people who should be watching this won't get slapped around because they're not watching this, but then all of us could use a little tune-up from time to time, and we're going to look into that today. I was considering using a different title for this particular lesson today. Now, we're working on it's Robert Coleman's book. Almost said A.B. Bruce, but finished that some time ago. We're working on Robert Coleman's book, The Master Plan of Discipleship. And chapter 0 was incarnation, actually being there. Chapter 2, 1 was selection. And then chapter 2, we spent several weeks on it, was association. And the reason we spent several weeks on that is because it is not trained well, lest we raise up people to lead in ministry today. But now we're moving on to the next chapter, which is chapter 3 in his configuration. And he used the word consecration and almost used the word dedication. And then I said, maybe not. See, we have a difficulty understanding other people, and we have a difficulty truly understanding ourselves. It's been said by psychologists, and I mostly agree with this, the best prediction of future behavior is past behavior. And that's if we take grace out of the mix and think that someone can do better because of God working within them. We all are bent to our own way. We're all messed up until grace takes hold of us. Somebody could be having good behavior and be demonstrating dedication, even in church life. They could be demonstrating dedication, but then not actual consecration. You see, many people, and you've seen stories, news stories, and they're horrific when you watch them. Somebody who's a dedicated church worker all their lives, and people loved them and honored them, and we found out that they were living some kind of a double life. Particularly, it's common that we've heard of some kind of sexual abuse in the other life that they were living. They were dedicated as far as the surface things were concerned and working with the church. And obviously, I'm not the judge, and none of us are. I would suggest to you that it's probable there was a degree of sincerity in dedication of what they did for the Lord's work. Perhaps a dedication that they thought, well, if I do enough good, it'll overcome the bad in my other life. I can't tell you. I'm not a mind reader. Nobody really truly is. So dedication didn't cover it. It needed a more theological word, consecration. And so that's what we're going to stick with. Even though I would like to upgrade, I'm not upgrading today because I think it's very important that we understand that what Jesus demanded was consecration. If you want just 2 words for it, that's total surrender. I'm not fond of the word surrender because it's kind of like, oh, I surrender. I didn't want to, but I'm forced to surrender. And I'm not fond of the word submission because it can carry with it the emotional weight of, oh, well, I'll do what I'm told. But this is total commitment and consecrating one's life to the Lord. Now, we've been drilling down and through the master plan of evangelism, and I mentioned that we're in chapter 3, and I would really encourage you to get this book. It's less than 100 pages. It's really well worth reading and well worth thinking, and I hope that we can take you a little deeper than Coleman went, using more words, I guess. I'm known to be the guy of more words, both orally and written. And I hope most of them, would wish that all of them, but my best hope is that most of them will be of value to somebody along the way. Now, in looking into this term of consecration, if we define it in Coleman style, the way he does it, this definition on the screen, I'm not going to read it to you. If we do it in George Barna-style, the Barna organization, they always contribute to Barna, but it's much broader than that. They do a lot of sociological, psychological, spiritual Research had come up with a lot of stats. Largely, the basis is the U.S. population, and less so in other parts of the world. That's probably the greatest weakness. But for our Anglophone audience, it's very useful because I would suggest that it's highly unlikely that there's a whole lot of difference in the essence of the thing. So what Barna might say, this isn't their direct quote, is consecration is a believer's surrender of life's control to God, reordering beliefs and behavior so that loving and serving Him governs every area of life. I rather like that, as well as I like the other definition by Coleman, and he would give you maybe a more theological flavor. This definition, which Coleman didn't write, says it's cross-shaped. Well, I get that, but it's not cross-shaped in the sense of some mystical annual kind of thing. A lot of people want to worship the cross and not the Savior of the cross. Well, some research facts that come from Barna. Now, I got to say that there's nothing precise on this because in the end of the day, what one is behind the scenes that shows itself in behavior may or may not in the behavior be showing what the real deep commitments are. You know, one of the things that bothers me, it really does bother me, so I'll get this off my chest, is a lot of people who are in ministry are only in ministry because they get a paycheck from it. That's no different than the guy who works at Walmart because he can't get a better job. No offense to Walmart. So they go to work at Target or, Home Depot or somebody else, but still, I got to put groceries on the table, so I got to go to work. A lot of people, unfortunately, are in Christian ministry. If they actually lost their paycheck, they wouldn't do it. And they become a leader in a church that they'd never want to be a member of and have no real intention of changing it, but they think that, well, at least that's closer to God's will for my life than otherwise. Now, of course, you might take a role in a church that you really don't particularly like, but trusting that God will use you to help change and transform the way the people of that church operate over time and so on. That's a different story. But they will, not want to go to the church, but they'll take a job leading the church because there's a paycheck. So I say, if I took the paycheck out and they got their paycheck from Walmart or Home Depot or Lowe's or some other retailer or some other job, would they be as dedicated in the life of the church? That would be an indicator of a consecration, dedication to the Lord Jesus Christ and His lordship in their life. So we can't really measure what's going on in the heart. We can only measure what we see. And to only measure what people tell us about themselves, because most surveys are what people say, and everybody puts on a halo. Say that, I read the Bible X number of days a week. That's probably less than, as an example. So if we take this word discipleship, which is not a word in the Bible, by the way, disciple is there redundantly, but discipleship is an invented word, not necessarily a bad one, but we have discipleship programs, and the definition has become terribly fuzzy. And when people say that they're really fully engaged in the discipleship processes of their church, large or small, 28% self-describe with their halo on as being fully engaged in the discipleship processes of their church. And when you hear what they say about big churches, they say, well, our small groups are the place where we really drill down in discipleship, to which I say, when most people are there on Sunday morning, and maybe you've got 50% are in your small groups, or maybe even more than that, but you're saying discipleship is only something that belongs to your Friday night meeting Or as a good friend said to me yesterday, that people in this small group in the church have said what in essence is our real church is here in the small group. Well, good. But the real church ought also to, and I would suggest also to be, and I would suggest it probably is, in the Sunday experience as well, but they don't have a strongly personal connection with it. However, in the research, 39%, they're not even engaged in the small group process or anything else. And that's with their halo on. They're thinking that they're more dedicated than they are, more consecrated than they are. But your engagement is way beyond their level of commitment. So if we have to say, looking at the broad Christian people, including those who are not totally engaged in church, but would tell you, yeah, I'm at such and such a church, and I know this, that, and the other thing, and I go when I can, and so on. The best estimates that we can come up with by various means of other triangulating on other sources other than Barna as well, somewhere between 2 and 5%. 1 out of 50, maybe. 1 out of 20, maybe, have anything that approximates that definition of consecration, the two definitions that I gave you. And if you take a look at the broad scale, then maybe somewhere around 15% of people who participate in church life are truly consecrated to following the Lord Jesus Christ. And of course, we would hope that that works at a little higher level, hopefully a much higher level, amongst the people who are in leadership. However, if the guy who's at the top of the pyramid, if we think of it as a pyramid, I don't like that. I see it as a burning pyramid, where he's the servant of all funneling up, right coming down. If that guy only does it because he's paid to do it, then I want to know what the guy is good when he's good for nothing, when he doesn't get paid for it, when he's willing to sacrifice his own gas to travel from here to there. To minister to people, when he's willing to set aside what he'd otherwise do and do something for Jesus, when he's willing to dig down deep at the end of the thing. You know, I have a friend who years ago gave me an illustration that I loved. And it applies here. It's kind of like you get the tube of toothpaste and you squeeze up the toothpaste and you get down towards the end. Have you ever noticed how it seems to last longer down towards the end because you're a little more careful about maybe how much you use, you're squeezing it out. But eventually, when you think it's empty, you might throw it in the waste paper basket along with the hairs off the hairbrush and the used Kleenexes. And at the end of the day, you come home and you've had some spicy food and you really want to brush your teeth and you see in the drawer that there's no toothpaste and you're like, oh, I threw it out. And you go down and you pick the toothpaste tube out of the bottom of the thing and you look at it and you say, yuck, and you wipe the junk off the top of it. And you squeeze it as far as you can get, nothing's happening. But then there's always something more because you stick the bristles of the toothbrush in there and you twist it around and you get enough toothpaste to at least get the foul taste out of your mouth. There ought to be something more. Now, I don't mean to frenetically doing harm to yourself over time because you're dedicated. But, when the clock doesn't go off and then you go home and it's over, when you're truly consecrated to Jesus, you're willing to fight it through until there's no more toothpaste in nothing. We would hope that we would have at least 2 to 5% who follow that toothbrush illustration, and they be an example to other people. Now, when we look at these things, it's fuzzy information. It's conceptual, not statistical. They measure what people report of themselves. As I said, they always report with a halo on. You do too. I do too. You have to really work hard at yourself to be honest with yourself when you fill in a survey. You tend to, they give you one of those Likert scales. Do you know that term? Likert, which is a scale from never to always. And it says sometimes, goes to most of the time, and it goes to all the time. Well, you can't say all the time, but it's sometimes, but you click on most of the time, yeah, that's the halo effect. Um, and the inner business, since it's life is like a continuum, it's like a process, it's like a walking down a road. And the road has ups and down bumps, good seasons and bad seasons, and so on. It is a process that we're all on. It's the process that the Bible uses the term sanctification. Oh my, I'll never get done today, but I'm going to throw this in anyway. There's a sense in which the moment that you come to Christ, you are sanctified. You're totally set apart for Him. And there's a time at the end of your life when you die and you go home to be with Him in glory, when you will be perfect, then you'll be totally sanctified. But in the meantime, there is a process of sanctification that you commit yourself to, that you struggle through on a day-to-day basis, and it is a struggle. And the rest comes at the end of the journey. There is no deep down full body rest here and now. Even when you get older, as I am, and as many of my friends are, you still have to find the way to keep pressing on to the degree that you still have the capacity to do so. I'm on the edge of starting to get to feel old because I can't remember names sometimes, or things that the titles of books or preachers or whatever. It kind of drives me nuts. My brain isn't what it once was. It had it topped out, I guess, and I'm not as quick as I used to be. And, that's the way it is, but I'm still squeezing hard for that last mile. I'm not resting through the gun lap of life, 4 laps around the course, and they go boom when it gets to the gun lap. When the runners, that's when you find out who's going to win. You don't win at the third lap, first lap, or the second lap. You win after you finish the gun lap and you finish strong. One of my good friends has written a book on finishing strong, and I watch him. He'll be 99, 91 years old next week. I think he said next week, but very soon. And he's still working hard at finishing strong. What an example he sets for me. I'd love to interact with him, but he ain't what he used to be. Neither am I. And if you're over the age of 50, you are on the downside of the trend. That might scare you a bit, but you are. And in fact, if you look at the pyramid of who's alive in your particular part of the world, you can Google that and say population pyramid. You'll see that starting at around age 50, the pyramid kind of goes up like this: is the people who are dying off at around 5%, will have up 20 a year on average, all the way up. And you're over the hill. Age 50. That might come as a newsflash, but you are. And yeah, you can say, well, I'm going to be different. Oh, you think so? No, you're not going to be different. That's the way our course with our broken bodies, broken and bent bodies, along with our broken and bent souls, we were designed and originally to live forever, and we will live forever in a new body, in a new heaven, and a new earth. Those of us who know Him. But all of our processes are broken down. That's why so many meds that we're taking. If you go to your church on Sunday morning and say, raise your hand if you're on some kind of meds, most of the adults will raise their hand because we're just messed up in so many ways. And it gets worse and worse. So you've got to give all that you've got, all phases of your life, but particularly you have to attend to that. And can't say, well, we'll leave that to the younger people. Nonsense. The younger people are looking to you. I have time, so I'm going to run fast here through this faster. It's a very uncommon thing for people to really demonstrating that they are totally surrendered to Jesus Christ and His will in their life. And what Coleman is describing in his book is that which is kind of uncommon in their life. And why is that true? Well, in the church, in this age and in other ages, and even in the New Testament age, we've committed, well, I'm a Christian, this Christian identity, but it is not really a demonstration of Christian surrender. Again, I wish I could have the word, but this more than dedication, but this heartfelt, will-driven presence of the Holy Spirit working within, enlivening our conscience. And so we don't say, woulda, coulda, shoulda. We say, I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. I'm going to do what he's convicting me to do. And it might take a little while for you to move into the realm of obedience, because we are still all struggle, just like Paul tells us how much he struggled in Romans chapter 7. We need to have models in front of us, those who demonstrate a higher level of consecration, so that we can say, I want to be like so-and-so when I grow up. And that starts young, but it goes to anybody who's just a little bit further down the road than you. Maybe not chronologically further down the road, but spiritually further down the road. We have made the mistake in the church in the modern age of substituting engagement in programs for engagement with people and engagement with our relationship with Jesus. So why are people just, hesitant to put it all on the altar? Well, there's a number of different things that go on there. I've got to discover some words here that'll help you a bit. Normal is as it should be. You take your temperature, and I don't even know what it is in Celsius, but it's 98.6, and that's the normal temperature. Now, some people are a little colder, some people are a little hotter than that, but for useful purposes, 98.6. That's normal in the proper sense of the word. But ordinary in our situation is as it is seen. And in the book of Revelation, it says, I wish you were hot, cold, but you're lukewarm. You may be ordinary, and it's measured by everybody else around you, but that's lukewarm, according to what we just covered in the statistics, and that's not good enough. Now, sometimes the word normative is used, and it bugs me when it's misused, because some people will say that a normative-sized church is an attendance of 60 on Sunday. What they mean is a normal-sized church in the sense of the ordinary church, the normal, which is seen as the average. And that's not really necessarily normal. 60 is how many people are in attendance, but that's a church of 120 people, because half of them aren't there. And they said some of them are in attendance for some reason, but generally speaking, they didn't get around to it. And that's not normal. That's ordinary. That's typical. And it's certainly not normative. Normal is seen just as kind of, I'm as good as the average. I'm there more often than some people, therefore I'm better than average. No, normal is as it should be. Always there without, illness or some other intervening thing, because it will be normal. If small groups with there, and I believe they should, it would be normal for everybody who says, I'm a Christian, to engage beyond an hour on a Sunday and in other programs in the life of the church that serve other purposes. Sunday tends to be not a great time for interaction, and I agree with that in terms of public interaction. You never know what people are going to say. But in a smaller group, there's less potential damage to be done and more openness that's possible if people get to know, like, and trust each other in a small group. So small groups are full of great purpose. And then you might even get more intimate if you're sitting down in a one-on-one situation with a mentor who knows something about you in a way that nobody else does. So there are a variety of things. Well, everybody should have those things. That's what the normal should be. So now if we get back to Coleman, wow. You can go read the chapter for yourself. It'll take you less than 10 minutes to read the chapter. It'll take me longer to explain it. Coleman talks about this consecration as the way of the cross. And we don't know about the cross early in the Gospels, but we get this turning point where he says, I'm going to suffer and die. And they say, oh, no, you're not. This is what requires a total surrender of your life, to be like Jesus and set your face like flint. This is the term used in the King James. I'm not sure if that's how that's translated or what that word really means, but absolutely purposefully saying, I am going to do this because it is the will of my Father in heaven. I don't feel like it. This is not what I feel like doing. I've got 1,000 reasons as to why I don't think it's going to work. I've awfulized the situation. I've expanded it to say, oh, if I talk to that person, they're likely going to yell at me, and I don't want to be yelled at, so I'm not going to talk to that person. We invent things in our minds. We all have these various mechanisms we learn to use that hurt us and stop us from doing the things that we know we should do, regardless of the results. We've got to learn to say, yeah, I'm measuring the cost. I know that maybe it isn't going to work all that much, but it's what God wants me to do, so I'm not going to do it like the half-hearted followers did. That's a great passage in the Gospel of John, where we see it in where Jesus says, you got to eat my bread, eat drink my blood, and eat my flesh. And when they all fell away, and in that situation, very few would pay the price. And Peter, as spokesman for the inner circle of the 12, said, what other options have we got? You've got the words of the life. We're not going away, because we know you're the real deal. And if you know that Jesus is the real deal, and God has put you in a place where you get a paycheck for it, good. If God is going to put you in a place where you don't get a paycheck for it, what changes? Should be nothing. That you still do what you can do. Now, you may not have the same number of hours in the week to do it, but that you still care about people. You still you relate to the people who others don't choose to relate to. And because there's no benefit to them, they'll tell you to relate to the people who are a little bit higher than you. And there's merit in that you should. That they have people in front of you, but you don't relate to people just because they're better than you or richer than you or smarter than you. And you relate to people because God has placed them in your life and they need you to give what you've got. Very few were willing to pay the price. Jesus knew it. He saw it. And he saw that there were these disciples who were all messed up in a lot of ways, didn't understand things. They got in trouble in conversation with Jesus, and there's so much of the life with Jesus that is reported for us, its interaction, and so much that is not recorded to us, because they were the quiet moments when they were traveling from place to place and perhaps sleeping in some borrowed beds somewhere, when they were having heart-to-heart conversations. And they were learning how to obey. And Jesus demonstrated for them what it was to obey the will of his Father, and that their obedience would open them to more light, more truth. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. And when you actually look at what Jesus commanded in the form that says you must do so and so, there's not that long of a list, but that's not the obedience. The obedience is to follow his example. And you can't follow his example if you don't study his example. And I would suggest to you that you need to constantly study his example. The Apostle Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. He said that to the Corinthian church, where a lot of the people weren't following it very well. But Paul said, I'm at a distance, not living in Corinth anymore. But you can be like me. Now, you need to be able to say, be like me, watch me. I'm going to set an example of how to carry on a conversation with that particular kind of person. Do you realize that Jesus never had the same kind of conversation exactly twice? He didn't have a script that he went through, and he often surprised people by the way that he responded to them, sometimes demonstrating a care that runs much deeper than the disciples ever would. I let the little kids come to me. Their personality is born to be like those who inherit the kingdom of heaven. And the disciples thought, well, kids are no good. You see, Jesus was a little different in so many ways, and they learned from that. And they learned over time to do more to obey the master. It's a process. It takes some time. And Jesus demonstrated it by them. John chapter 4, I think. He says, my meat, my food is to do the will of my Father in heaven. And then you know that when he got to the garden, he said, I'm not sure about this. I don't really want to do this. Nevertheless, Doesn't matter what's going on inside of my human psyche and these molecules and endorphins and all this stuff inside of me in my human nature. I don't want to do it. But nevertheless, I'm committed to doing your will. That's what I came to do. I'm going to finish the job. And he did it. And he demonstrated that submission in front of his disciples. So, obedience is what shapes our character and our purpose. Life is not driven by purpose. It's driven by patterns. Do you grasp it? It's what you're doing and what your habits are on a regular basis that make the difference as to where you get. Now, you need to have a strong and deep purpose, and that purpose to be all that God wants you to be, and so on. So there's nothing wrong with having a purpose deeply in your life. But to say purpose-driven life, very few people are driven by the purpose. They might think, "Oh, I worship you, dear Jesus. I'm going to be all you can be this way, this day," and then go home to watch the football game when they should be doing something else. I'm not saying don't watch the football game. I'm saying if you know that you should be dropping by somebody who you just missed that Sunday morning and go knock on the door and say, "Hey, Mary, just missed you this morning. Just wanted to let you know that." Have a little conversation. Maybe Mary will invite you in for a cup of tea and she'll tell you that she just learned from her doctor that she's got cancer. You don't know what will happen. The relationships. And you don't want to, you can't say, "Come on, nice sermon. Great music today. Oh, that was so inspiring," and then go home and just live the same way you always lived. The principle is that consecration is a lot more than dedication to just showing up for a meeting once in a while. And it means that there's going to be a battle because you're going to really, really want to watch the game. But you got to set that aside to do what you know you should do. It requires absolute allegiance to the master. There's so many things that give me some more time and I'll help you with this. But you need to obey in the moment. If you think about it, you won't. You'll find excuses. I had a poster years ago that said, "If you have to swallow a frog, don't look at it too long." Nobody wants to swallow a frog, and of course that's just a metaphor. But if you look at the frog too long, you'll say, "Well, I'm really not hungry now. I'll get around to eating the frog later." The difficult thing. If you haven't eaten a frog, don't look at it too long. And its corollary is, if you've got a number of frogs to swallow, don't say, "I'll start with the 10th largest frog." Do your very best to get up the ladder even to the big one first. Take the big one first. And then you get it off your mind and your soul and you've taken care of it. It doesn't matter what it turns out. It matters if you do it. And the indifference that is so common has hurt so many people. And this mediocrity that just is rampant in the life of the church is really a problem. But it's not new. It was true then. It's true now, but it's not so with you. You would need to be different. And so I'd recommend to you, I don't care whether you get paid to do this or not, find a few people you can work with, the best few you can find, those who are more responsive to you than others, and schedule your relationship with them. Don't say, "We'll get together for coffee sometime." Say, "Next Thursday afternoon, what are you doing at 2:00? And you'll see at Starbucks or your favorite coffee shop. If your church is smart, they'll actually meet in a coffee shop. I digress. You then start a relationship that you schedule and plan a variety. You don't always go meet at the same coffee shop. Plan to go for a walk in the park. Plan to go for a drive together. Even if you're just going over to the lumber store to pick up a piece of lumber, you can pick up your friend that's not too far away. Say, "Come to the lumber store with me just for the fun of it." And go to the lumber store and stick the 2x4 in the back of your car and see where the conversation goes. It doesn't always have to be spiritual. It doesn't always have to have a curriculum in front of you. Build your relationship. Say, "I don't know if I should buy this 2x4 or that 2x4. And then see how you process decisions of life. Plan the variety into your life, and then show them how you work. And then when you get to the checkout counter, be nice to the person who's checking out. You're not going through the automatic thing. There's always somebody there. Smile. Give people a chance. to see that you're actually worth being with. Now I'm going to tell you about next time. We're going to next time look at this whole business of how we're mixed up inside and we avoid self-denial because we mistake our behavior for the depth that it should be. And we minimize this whole business of counting the cost that Jesus demanded, expected. A little consecration. Thought, well, I get 74. Is that a pass? No. He's demanding this will that you have inside of you that is generated by the Spirit of God in this pattern of behavior that isn't necessarily exciting, but that builds you to where you need to go. There's so much more. And consecration is absolutely required of you. You got this far. And most people don't get this far into this video, but you're here and you can make a big difference if you will let God work his life out through you. See you next time.